even were able to have a building. The first library was in the basement of the police station. And then we grew to having the library in a storefront in Ellisburg Shopping Center. And from there, we had the library which we have today, which I think is a credit to the community.
According to Gilmore, during his administration, the population quadrupled from 10,000 to over 40,000. Neighborhoods sprouted up everywhere. This apparent success proved to be a double-edged sword for him as he faced his worst attack from the press on the housing issue. It's been a subject that future mayors would have to deal with repeatedly.
One of the things that the press criticized me very strongly for was that I didn't want to have any row houses or condominiums, or as they call them now, or townhouses in the township. My main reason was the fact that the building codes at that time were not stringent enough to put up the kind of buildings which were safe from a fire hazard. I took the reporter from the Cherry Hill News on a trip one day to see some townhouses being built, and showed her how fire hazard they were, how much of a fire hazard they were. And from that time on, I didn't have the criticism, but up until then, I was being criticized very strongly for not having more, what they called at that time, affordable housing.
Gilmore stated he was concerned not only with housing and industry, but with the services the booming population would require. The one thing he said he always wanted for the community was balance.
I was proud of the fact that when I left office over there, we had developed a community which was well balanced. It had a commercial and industrial area which was helping with our tax ratables. We had created a very nice residential areas in most of the sections of the township. While I was the mayor, we had tremendous growth. In 1 year, we had 1,500 brand new houses built in Cherry Hill, all single families. At the same time, we were building schools and we were building churches. I think that I was part the dedication of 9 different churches, and I think I had part in developing at least 10 different schools.
Today, he remains pragmatic about political life.
One of the things you have to be as a mayor or as a commissioner in a township like Cherry Hill, you have to have broad shoulders and be able to take some criticism. If you can't take the criticism and can't take the heat, you better stay away from the council people and better stay out of politics.
After 20 years of rapid growth, the mood in Cherry Hill began to change. Where there once appeared to be unending vistas of open land, there was now congestion, and the 70s brought a new mindset to the township. John Holden, the Democratic Party-endorsed candidate, was elected mayor and presented a completely new agenda for Cherry Hill, where conservation became a priority.
The first thing we did when we came to office is that we put a halt to wall development. We put a moratorium on any building. We wanted to examine where the community had been, where we are now, and where we wanted to go in the future. We commissioned studies to be done. No one knew where any of the pipes under the township were, for sewage, for drainage, and so forth. That study was done. We wanted to know where the water problems, the drainage problems were in the township, and that study was done. We wanted to study the overall master plan of the township to make sure that we were providing the proper housing and proper development and proper open space for the township. So while that work was done, we were also planning what we could do for the youth in the community and for our senior citizens. And we then started implementing programs to meet those needs.
Lots of families usually mean lots of children, and where farm kids can just look outside their back door for fun and recreation, suburban kids need more structure.
One of the problems were there was not a place for the children to play. And in one area, like tennis courts, there were 4 tennis courts in the township at the time. They were behind West High School. We wanted to build tennis courts in each of the areas of the township, and in order to do that and do it in an inexpensive way as possible, we worked with the school board. They were very cooperative with us and allowed us to build the tennis courts on the school grounds. We built 32 tennis courts. That not only gave the community the opportunity to use those tennis courts when school was not in session, but it gave the school department the opportunity to use tennis courts in their as part of their recreational program. But it saved the taxpayers a great deal of money, not having to buy the land in addition to building the tennis courts.
The need for ratables to help fund services doesn't go away, even though you may have imposed a building moratorium. And Holden found a new and much-needed ratable to help defray costs, one he's very proud of.
There's the property that is opposite the Hyatt House on 38, or the Executive Office campus. We went out and looked for bids for people to build on that property, requiring that they build so many square foot a building a year and develop it over a specific set of time, so that we, number one, would create the jobs, number two, create the ratables.
According to Holden, the downside of the mayoral job for him was always financial.
I guess the most difficult thing I really had to do was to say no when people came to me and wanted things done that I could not do overnight. In other words, I could not correct all the problems of the last 10 years of development overnight. And there were an awful lot of people in town who had real drainage problems that we couldn't possibly attack all at one time. We had people who had a very difficult rainstorm, that water would come into their family room, and in the Kingston area, for instance. And so that was the most difficult thing, I think, is not being able to accomplish all that you would like to accomplish to help people who had reasonable problems because of money.
During Holden's tenure, it wasn't newer and bigger that counted, but holding on to a little of the township's past that mattered.
We created a conservation commission. Any development within the township that went on had to pass through that conservation commission and make sure that the community was being properly taken care of. As part of that, in upgrading our master plan and providing for housing, we required that all the developers set aside 25% of any land they were developing for open space. In addition to that, we went out and the township purchased 250 acres of land, so that the township would always have some open space for passive or active recreation.
To keep the rapidly disappearing history of the town alive, Holden appropriated the funds to purchase the Barclay farmstead. The condition of the house was deplorable, but those with foresight knew that this was a place worth salvaging, and they were right. The farmstead is a mecca for cultural activities in Cherry Hill and serves to educate all township children about life during the late 18th and early 19th centuries.
We are very, very proud. I think that's the proudest thing of my administration. As I sit here in the Barclay farmstead itself, it makes me feel very good, so that my children, my grandchildren, and all the children in this community in years to come will be able to come here with their families as they grow and enjoy and see what that era brought to the township.
In 1975, John Rocco, a Republican Party-backed candidate, was elected to the town council. He remembers his first election as a very pleasant surprise.
Our initial election, yes, we were absolutely not the favorite to win. The mayor and council that we're in were very popular, and so our victory at that time was rather a surprise. In fact, I'd only been involved in public, even pursuing public life for a 2-month period of time. I was principal, and PTA president asked me to run for council, and 2 months later I was mayor of a town of 70,000 people, so it was an exciting night.
In the early 70s, Cherry Hill underwent an unpopular real estate revaluation. The old axiom about people voting their pocketbooks proved to be no different here, and the Republican-affiliated team won a majority, and Rocco was selected mayor. It's something he remains low-key about.
I think in campaigns, issues rank about 4 or 5. I don't think they're really the primary concern. I think it's how you're perceived by the public, whether they have confidence in you, whether they really believe what you have to say. Because basically all politicians say the same thing, you know, they're all good guys and all good gals and all for the same kinds of things that are going to affect the public. And then it becomes a matter of credibility and whether they believe you or not. As an educator for a good number of years in the township, teaching, you know, throughout the township at Barclay. I taught here in the old Barclay School in the early 60s, and having taught at Woodcrest School and been a principal there and an educator. You really do touch a lot of people's lives, and you work with their children and they get to know you, and it's a deeper understanding than you might get with other